Tonight, clashes across the country. USC cancels graduation. Journalists get beat up. America in 2024 looks like America in 1968. And above the law.
The president has to have immunity. This has nothing to do with me. This has to do with a president in the future.
The Supreme Court decides if a man is president or king, how the justices tip their hand.
There's nothing to suggest that presidents need immunity because they've managed to do just fine for over 200 years without it.
In a very good day for Donald Trump. We come on the air with breaking news tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern. The protests across America continue. They have gone from misguided and anti-Semitic to now anti-American. What started at Columbia University has now spread to the University of Texas, Southern California, Northwestern University, at least half a dozen others. USC has canceled its graduation ceremony following a series of violent clashes with police. Evidently, they can't get a handle on things there and allow people to graduate. At Columbia, protesters defied a deadline to clear out of campus. Protesters there are defiant, and of course, the administration has still done absolutely nothing. At George Washington University, things are heating up as protesters have taken over the center of campus, and they've draped a statue of the founding fathers with Palestinian flags. We start there with NewsNation correspondent Evan Lambert. 7 p.m. was the deadline, was it not, Evan?
Hey, Leland. Yeah, the university all day has been sending out several messages to students saying that they had to clear this area, the university yard, at 7 p.m., but they have not converged on this group at this point. There's just a handful of GW University police officers kind of off to the side, and that's where they've been standing really for the last few hours. We got here about 2 o'clock. This encampment was set up at 5 or 6 this morning, so they've been here all this time. University has been talking about this 7 p.m. deadline, saying that this space is not allowed for this demonstration. They've set up some kind of alternative space that is nearby. The group here that is running things tells me that they have no plans to leave right now, but we know that D.C. police has been called in by the university to essentially be on standby, probably waiting for some decision by the university as to how they want to handle people if they don't leave. But again, as you're seeing right now, there's probably about 500, 600 people here in this university yard right now, and we have not seen the police really clash with them, and this demonstration is going strong.
At least as far as I can tell, at least half of the people right behind you have masks on, or keffiyehs, which is the Palestinian militants' head garb from Arafat covering their face. Tell us some of the chants. Is it anti-Israel, or is it sort of extended into other things?
Well, it's some of the same chants that we've been hearing at these protests since they've been happening, but especially the ones on college campuses this week and starting last weekend. They're saying Palestine will be free. They're saying they're making references to Intifada, long live the Intifada. They're saying from the river to the sea. You know, many of those things that many people would agree are either borderline or, in some cases, anti-Semitic with some of those phrases here. And that's what we've been continuing to hear over the last several hours.
Yeah, and in some cases, a call for violence. Evan, thanks. We'll check back in with you throughout the hour if anything happens there. Keep us up to date. Thank you. We are really in uncharted territory. Really. Consider this video from Northwestern University when a student journalist filmed a newly installed protest camp. So let's examine this video. We're going to show you more clashes later, but this video proves these people could care less about peaceful protest. Peaceful protesters don't cover their faces with ski masks. They give interviews about their cause. They're passionate. They want media attention. These people want violence. It's not about the Palestinians. It's about destroying America. And we know that because they tell you. Remember Kamani James from yesterday? He's one of the leaders at Columbia. On the left is his picture from the Black Lives Matter days. Back then, he said he hated white people. Here's his latest views.
Zionists, they don't deserve to live comfortably, let alone Zionists don't deserve to live. The same way we're very comfortable accepting that Nazis don't deserve to live, fascists don't deserve to live, racists don't deserve to live, Zionists, they shouldn't live in this world.
Does he speak for every protester? Of course not. But these are their leaders. And at this point, if you're there when people are chanting from the river to the sea, well, that's sort of who you've put your lot in with. Nazis, National Socialists, blamed, targeted, and killed the Jews, but they went far beyond that in their quest for power. It starts with the Jews, it always does, but it never ends there. We're already seeing that arc, something Ronald Reagan warned us about now almost 40 years ago.
Someone very profoundly once said many years ago that if fascism ever comes to America, it'll come in the name of liberalism.
The same applies to thought and political views. These protesters are liberals, or maybe something other than liberals. We'll get into that in a minute. But they're advocating not for a better tomorrow. They're neo-Marxists. They tell us what we should believe. That makes them fundamentally different than the 1968 anti-war protests. Back then, it was the cops beating up the journalists, like when Dan Rather got roughed up at the Chicago Democratic National Convention.
Hands off of me. Unless you intend to arrest me, don't push me, please. I know you will, but don't push me. Take your hands off of me unless you plan to arrest me.
Wait a minute.
Wait a minute. Well, Walter, as you can see...
I don't know what's going on, but these are security people apparently around Dan.
Famed journalist Geraldo Rivera is here. As a young man, he saw firsthand the power of student-led protests. Today, he's NewsNation contributor at large. Geraldo, 1968, it was the security guys beating up journalists. Is it going to be the protesters beating up journalists in 2024?
Well, let me just direct my immediate wrath at the student, I think from Harvard, who was Black Lives Matter, and then now he's saying that Jews and white people don't deserve to live. That's an opportunistic punk. Don't sweat that. That's someone who will flounder in life, who's giving away a great opportunity that he has. Instead, he's just getting the flavor of the day. They're not real. Everything you've shown today, these kids, and I have a daughter who graduated from Northwestern. When you see the scale of it, this isn't the Rodney King riots. These isn't the George Floyd riots. This isn't the days of rage from 1968, 1969. It's a time, though, Leland, where the Palestinians are having their moment. After 75-plus years, finally, these young people have said, hey, what about the Palestinians? Of course, the cause is the horrible war in Gaza and, of course, October 7th. But this is the age. I am not, as a parent of 5, I am not overly alarmed by what I am seeing. I was involved myself. I went to jail. I was arrested for kidnapping Donald Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense, and handcuffing myself and a bunch of others in his office.
Hold on. People could have said Hitler was an opportunistic punk back in the day as well. When people say they want to kill you, and when people are talking about tearing down the very fabric of institutions in America, it seems at least wise to heed their warnings rather than sit back and apologize and explain them away. The Economist, certainly not in any way a right-wing newspaper, writes, as in 1968, the Democrat risks being the candidate of chaos and war. The campus is coming for Joe Biden. You say I would argue that it's very different, right? If the Palestinians are having their day, then you'd be going after Hamas, which is the one that is continuing to oppress the Palestinians, not Israel that's trying to liberate them from Hamas. Put that aside for a second. This is the same thread of BLM. This is no longer about Palestine. This is about taking a neo-Marxist view into America. Tell me where I'm wrong.
I think that where you're wrong, I think you're an excellent reporter and a good writer. I think, though, to jump from Hitler to these kids is a jump too far. This isn't Hitler. These are kids that are going to go home and their mom's going to get mad at them. And their father's going to say, you're going to get your allowance cut off. These are middle-class bourgeois kids who've never had any, conflict or adventure. Let them, as long as they don't break anything, as long as they don't hurt anybody. When you compare it,
Geraldo, I hate to insert facts into this conversation, but the fellow who said he hates white people, who then said all Zionists he believes should die, is not a bourgeois kid. He is a orphaned son of a Jamaican maid who came to this country as an immigrant. And clearly white people allowed him to go to college and to Columbia University on a scholarship, and this is what he does with it. That's a revolutionary. That's not just a punk.
Come on, Leland. A revolutionary? He's the flavor of the day. What do you got for me tomorrow? Tomorrow it's going to be the Chinese. Tomorrow it'll be the
no, it won't.
Internet giants. There'll be this. He'll get whatever it is that pleases him, that gets him attention. You point out he probably is in some way dysfunctional, needs therapy, needs counseling, whatever it is, or he'll just burn himself out and become a criminal. Or maybe he'll go straight and become a newsman.
Oh, okay.
Who knows? I don't know.
Okay, so
all I know is that what I'm seeing. Hold it. What I'm seeing is not a revolution. What I'm seeing is Gen Z, about time, got off their ass, got out of their mother's basement, and then they put themselves on the line, presumably for something bigger than themselves. Where it goes, I hope it doesn't continue to metastasize and fall apart. I don't expect it will. I think the universities so far have been pretty measured and pretty logical in their approach. Or give them a yard someplace, let them go scream at each other and camp out. I don't see this as anarchy. This isn't, and this is certainly not Hitler.
All right. Well, so if these kids were a bunch of white kids who had Klan hats on,
they are mainly a bunch of white kids.
Okay. Well, if they were rather than yelling about Palestine, they probably couldn't find on a map, and they were yelling about black kids and the Klan and Klan slogans, or they were yelling that gays should be beaten. Would you be saying the same thing?
Words, sticks and stones would break my bones, and names or words can never hurt me. I mean, that's the way it is. I don't let them say whatever that comes to their mind. As long as it rhymes, they're going to be happy with it. What I look at is the people in charge. Now, what are the administration doing? Initially, we saw with the resignations at Harvard and Penn, where the president seemed very insensitive to those remarks and the impact that was happening. I said that I had a daughter that graduated at Northwestern. I have another daughter who's going to college in September. A Jewish, beautiful, proud Jewish American, student who hopes to be a great writer. I am acutely aware of the situation. I monitor it. I refuse to allow her to be endangered. I insist on the administration's having a plan if it comes to that, but I don't want to make more of this than what it is. Gaza is horrible. What has happened starting October 7th is horrible.
You mentioned, look, nobody disagrees that it's terrible. The question is who's responsible for it. That's a different conversation. But I'll just leave you with this with Northwestern. You get the last 30 seconds if it's 30 seconds, which is Northwestern. It was the teachers who surrounded the kids who were chanting these vile things. Teachers surrounded. And an assistant dean was at one of the protests where people were talking about, hey, ho, ho, Israel's got to go. The dean was there to protect the kids. Okay, this is video from Northwestern, my alma mater, where the teachers and professors surrounded the kids chanting from the river to the sea to protect them from being arrested. How is that okay?
If that's the mechanism by which the administration and the teachers make common cause with their students, show them that their rage, whatever it is being listened to, that they are, a protected class. I am still okay. When you start breaking windows, when you start hurting people, when you start hurting the cops, when you really are out of line in a way that your behavior becomes uncivilized, then I'll come back on the show and I'll say, damn those anarchists, those commies, those, whatever, anti-Semites.
Okay. So the video I showed you at the beginning of the reporter getting beat.
In the words of Rodney King, beating. You want to be beaten? I'll give you a clip of 100 more violent encounters I've had than that.
Okay.
But in the words of Rodney King, why can't we get along? Why can't we get along? That's my final.
All right, fair enough. Geraldo, it's good to see you as always.
Thank you. Northwestern, go Wildcats. Go Wildcats.
I can't say that anymore. Not with what's going on. It's good to see you, Geraldo. Thank you. Donald Trump's dueling days in court, how he won, and he did win big at the Supreme Court. And America never cared about Donald Trump's affairs. Can a prosecutor get a jury to care? All right. Plus, how did liberals become so illiberal? Are the dangers that Reagan warned about coming true? Then we go live pictures back to Columbia University right now, where students have continued to defy any type of order to disperse, and the university seems to have absolutely no desire to enforce the rules that they have put down. What comes next when we come back? We noticed something interesting today as tens of thousands of college kids stormed their campuses, buildings. They built Gaza encampments. Police fired rubber bullets and tear gas into the crowds in Georgia. Texas Rangers came into the University of Texas. As we showed you, a reporter was beaten up at Northwestern. None of our competitors seem to care about covering the ultra-progressive liberal college elite and their riots. This is the homepage of ABC News today. Not a single message. Same thing with NBC News. Heavy on the Trump coverage, little Harvey Weinstein, some Princess Kate. Not a thing about these protests. They're allegedly so liberal and so virtuous. CNN, wall-to-wall Trump coverage, the hush money case, and SCOTUS. Again, nothing about all of these people standing up for Palestine. MSNBC, also the Trump trials. Here's what our friends at CNN and MSNBC had to say when they did cover the college protests. We're going to play an interview from each earlier this week. Then we're going to play exactly what they are so keen on supporting.
Even with the anti-war movement, they got Lyndon Johnson to agree on March 31st to negotiate and to stop the bombing, and he pulled out of the race. So it's much more complicated and nuanced today. But this was a time I wish young people could look back at and take some hope from the fact that if you do it right, it can make a difference.
Who are inspired by what happened with George Floyd in 2020 and seeing what is happening in Gaza, that has only really acted as a catalyst here. And so I wonder at the wisdom of bringing in the armed police into what is essentially a university campus.
Zionists, they don't deserve to live comfortably, let alone Zionists don't deserve to live.
Never forget the 7th of October. That will happen. Never forget the 7th of October. One more time.
Pachunga Sargon, your opinion editor of Newsweek. Her new book, Second Class, How the Elites Betrayed America's Working Men and Women. Perfect guest for this topic, because we move it past anti-Semitism into what it is, neo-Marxism. How did liberal America become so illiberal?
It's a great question, Leland, and the answer is because the thing that distinguishes it from moderate America or conservative America is not actually that it is liberal or even that it is left. It is that it is a product of an elite university education. And that's why CNN and MSNBC and the liberal outlets are not covering it. They know that there is no purchase or buy-in from the average American for this kind of chicanery. And the thing to note about this, Leland, is that at the same time as these people are chanting these ugly slogans at Jewish students, they are also demanding a safetiest standard that they be protected from the kinds of normal things that happen in public, like being filmed by the media. All of this comes together to show you, like, this is not like previous anti-war movements. These people do not want to convince the vast majority of Americans. They want to lord their elite status over them. They want the right to be morally superior, which is why the liberal media is not covering it.
So you think about 1968, right, when there was a real anti-war movement in America. And we look at the side-by-side videos, and it's chilling, really, if you think about what 68 meant in America and where conceivably we're headed in 2024. But if you think about liberal universities that came out, and the liberal concept on university campuses that came out of 68 and brought about a lot of really great things out of that, and some really, really important changes in America. And yet now that same liberal worldview is now eating itself almost, as we're seeing professors protecting the students, professors giving kids time out of off class in order to go to these protests. I'm trying to figure out, and this is where we go from here, how, if these universities ever come back from this.
Yeah, I mean, think of Dr. King, right? He mobilized mass support for civil rights by appealing to the common humanity in the average American that he knew was there, you know, beneath the racism, right? Or if he didn't know it was there, he was convinced that he could convince them that it should be there. This is the exact opposite. These professors are coddling their students who they are terrified of. The students are totally amoral. They're chanting slogans from Hamas's charter, right? They do not want to convince anybody. They want to shrink the number of people who agree with them, which is why they're so hateful, because that's how they bolster their elite status. If the elites get mass purchased, they're no longer the elites, right? That's what we're seeing here.
Okay, so you think about where this came from, which was out of the BLM movement. Movement came out of a neo-Marxist worldview. Ibrahim X. Kendi and others, Nicole Hannah-Jones. What happened? How all of a sudden did the Palestinians become the cause des célèbres now 4 years after the 2020 riots?
You know, it's a great question, right? Every day it seems like there's a new cause du jour. In my view, the reason that they abandoned the Black Lives Matter call for, you know, revolution and the re-racialization of American life was because there was no buy-in from average Black people who just want to live in peace next to their neighbors. They abandoned that. They moved on to the trans agenda, right? But the trans agenda also has no real purchase. It is such a niche view that does not actually distinguish left versus right, but the elites from everybody else. And now they've alighted on this issue. Now, Leland, there is a way to advocate for Palestinians that would have a lot of purchase. People are upset about the devastation in Gaza, although the vast majority of Americans back Israel. But if these protesters would oppose Hamas and demand the release of the hostages, that would have mass buy-in from the American people. Instead, they choose to side with the people who have perpetrated the most evil we have seen in recent history, because that is how they distinguish themselves from the good-hearted middle-class Americans.
Yeah, they align themselves with those who they view as oppressed, so then they can do what they want. All right, Batya, thank you very much as always. We appreciate it.
Thanks,
Donald Trump may have gotten a huge win at the U.S. Supreme Court today. Will it be enough to pause the January 6th trial till after the election?
Charlottesville was a little peanut, and it was nothing compared, and the hate wasn't the kind of hate that you have here. This is tremendous hate, and we have a man that can't talk about it because he doesn't understand it. He doesn't understand what's going on with our country.
Donald Trump wasn't at the Supreme Court today for arguments on his claim of presidential immunity, but he had a very, very good day there. Here's Justice Neil Gorsuch.
So why couldn't he be prosecuted for leading a civil rights protest in front of the Capitol that delays a vote on a piece of important legislation?
So I think what you need to do is run through all of the very president-specific protective layers of analysis.
In other words, the Justice Department of whoever the president who is sitting is decides what they should and should not charge a former president with. That went over like a ton of bricks at the Supreme Court today. Here's Tom Dupree predicting as much yesterday on the show.
I think we will get a ruling before the election. The Supreme Court will decide this case before it adjourns for the summer, that is to say by the end of June. But it may not fully decide the issue. In other words, what the Supreme Court could say is that, well, there is some degree of presidential immunity, but we're not quite certain of the contours of it, how it applies to Trump's case. So we're going to send this case back to the lower courts to figure out whether some of these charges do fall within the scope of immunity, which could string things out dramatically.
Tom's back with us, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General in a slightly darker suit. Good to see you, my friend.
Thank you.
After today's arguments, are you more confident in your prediction?
I am more confident in my prediction. Look, that's where the justices clearly were angling. They were very receptive to the Trump defense team today, their arguments that the president enjoys some degree of immunity while in office from criminal prosecution. But the thing that was being debated was, well, how far does that immunity extend? Does it extend to the president's core functions? Does it extend beyond it? So it looks to me like the way this is getting teed up is for the Supreme Court to decide this case by announcing a broad rule of constitutional law, but then sending the case back to the lower courts to actually apply that rule in the Trump case.
Okay, so they apply that rule in the Trump case. Does that mean we get a trial in the Trump case before November?
Very unlikely. Very unlikely. I think the process of trying to parse out, well, what charges brought by the special counsel fall within the scope of immunity and which fall outside the scope of immunity, that's not something that could be done in a day. That's something that would probably require argument, evidence, consideration by a judge, and in all likelihood would push this trial date past the election.
You can often tell a lot about how people view things by the reaction. And obviously the justices don't give interviews, but everybody listened to it. Here is some of the reaction on MSNBC. Take a listen.
We're talking about the scope of presidential power. We're talking about the nature of separation of powers. We're at the heart of American democracy right now. So we're watching this and it's high drama, but it's also happening against the backdrop of protest all throughout the country. The first time we've ever seen a president in a courthouse, right, held. So this is really American democracy in the balance.
And what is going to come out of that is if the Supreme Court does not allow a trial before November, then the Supreme Court has destroyed American democracy, or have they protected it?
Well, I think the justices in the majority think they would protect it. They were very concerned today about allowing charges against a former president to go forward precisely for that reason. What sort of precedent would that establish? Are we going to be in a nation where new presidents come in and immediately begin prosecuting their predecessors? Again, the Supreme Court was worried about that concern, and a lot of their questions seemed designed to really push the government a bit to assuage them that wasn't really going to be a problem.
Right. One of those was from Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Take a listen.
How about President Obama's drone strikes?
So the Office of Legal Counsel looked at this very carefully and determined that, number one, the federal murder statute does apply to the executive branch. The president wasn't personally carrying out the strike, but the aiding and abetting laws are broad. And it determined that a public authority exception that's built into statutes and that applied particularly to the murder statute because it talks about unlawful killing did not apply to the drone strike.
I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on television. But that sounds an awful lot like the Department of Justice saying, trust us.
Yeah, it's basically saying the Department of Justice is going to opine on what actions would be legal and what would be illegal, and then the president can act accordingly. But I think the difficulty with that is presidents face thousands and thousands of decisions almost on a daily basis, and they can't expect to go and get a legal opinion in advance as to whether every one of those decisions would be lawful.
Right, and a new president and a new Justice Department could look at something.
Do a 180.
Right.
Say we have a different view of it.
Right. All right. Hey, congratulations on a correct prediction. Thank you. We enjoy having people back when they're right. Trump was, of course, not at the Supreme Court today. He was at his trial in New York. He's required to be there. The former president sat through another day of testimony from David Pecker. He's the ex-publisher of the National Enquirer. Pecker was grilled about payments he made to a former Playboy playmate named Karen McDougal. pictured here with Donald Trump. McDougal alleged a 10-month affair with Donald Trump beginning in 2006. Under direct examination by prosecutors, Pecker testified that he paid McDougal $150,000 to buy the exclusive rights to the story of her alleged affair with Trump, with the aim of keeping it quiet. That didn't really work out so well. He then testified that Trump told him Karen is a nice girl when the men discussed the former Playmates allegations. Congressman Jim Jordan, chair of the House Judiciary Committee, is with us now. Over the past, say, 8-9 years, we have learned the American people really don't care about Donald Trump's affairs. Right. Is there a danger, though, in a jury caring?
Well, I think the key point is what's the crime here. So this was something done a long time ago, but there's no crime that Alvin Bragg has alleged. In fact, this case is so weak that no one wanted to bring it. The Department of Justice looked at the same fact pattern. They didn't want to bring a case. The Federal Elections Commission didn't want to bring a case, didn't bring a case. Alvin Bragg's predecessor, Cy Vance, didn't bring a case. And even when Alvin Bragg got elected, even though he said he had went after President Trump 100 times, when he gets elected, he doesn't bring the case because it's so weak. There's no real crime here. And it wasn't until Alvin Bragg's assistant prosecutor, Mark Pomerantz, resigns, throws a fit, does media interviews, and writes a book that the public pressure got so big on Mr. Bragg that he decided to resurrect what they called the zombie case and bring it forward. So there's no crime here. They're saying that this was all part of some conspiracy to impact the 2016 election. Well, for goodness sake, that was 8 years ago. No crime here, and I think the country sees it. And then finally, I would say their star witness is Michael Cohen, a convicted perjurer who came in front of Congress and lied several times. That's their star witness. Everybody understands there is no case here.
Look, we've said on the program that this case is about as thin as turnip soup, and probably it benefits Democrats politically that it's not on camera. That said, you've got every newspaper, every media organization with headlines once again drudging up Donald Trump's affairs and tawdry behavior, which I think we can all agree probably would not make necessarily a wife happy or a mother proud. And we've seen over the past 4 months, and this is undeniable, his poll numbers fall. Real Clear Politics average went from up 3 points on Joe Biden to now statistically tied with Joe Biden. Like it or not, are the cases and is the revelations in the day after day drumbeat having the Democrats' desired effect politically?
Obviously that's what the Democrats want. They've continued to escalate and go after President Trump now for 8 years. But I still would point to the fact that in all 7 of the swing states, President Trump is either ahead or dead even. So he's winning Georgia, he's winning North Carolina. Last one I saw, he's even to slightly up in Pennsylvania, big time up in Michigan, even in Wisconsin, and then winning in Nevada and Arizona. So they can keep trying all this. They've tried it for 8 years. I always point out they spied on his campaign in 2016. Then it was the Mueller investigation. Then it was impeachment. Then it was raiding President Trump's home. Then it was Jack Smith. And then it was Fonnie Willis, Alvin Bragg. Then it was the 14th Amendment. And now they got an actual trial where they're drudging up things that aren't really crimes to try to get this guy and keep him from off the campaign trail. But I don't think it's working. I think as evidenced by the fact he's winning or even in all 7 of the swing states.
Yeah, and we'll see what the Supreme Court says. Maybe even the best thing that could happen to Donald Trump politically is a hung jury or an acquittal in New York, and then we're off to the races. Congressman, it's always good to see you. Thank you.
You bet, Leland. Take care.
Yeah. Harvard Yard becomes the latest scene of students, as you can see, harassing, intimidating, chasing Jewish kids off campus. How Harvard students are fighting back, and they are. But can they win against an administration firmly on Hamas's side? .45. Around the corner from UCLA is University of Southern California. That is where they canceled graduation because the administration couldn't get a hold of what was happening on its campus. New video of an encampment forming at Harvard that we showed you from a little bit earlier. The number of students rushed into the Harvard Yard chanting "From the river to the sea," and then kicked all of the Jewish kids out. We're also going to take you now to George Washington University here in Washington, D.C. Evan Lambert has been there. All right, Evan, so we're 50 minutes now or so past when everybody was supposed to be gone. I'm seeing the crowd behind you is growing, if anything. The encampment is an unauthorized use of university space. This from the university. The university and MPD are continuing to work in coordination to determine how to best address the situation and ensure student compliance. So far, have you seen any evidence of the university telling folks to leave?
No. So that obviously deadline, 7 p.m., has come and gone, almost an hour past that now. And this group is still protesting here on the university yard. You can see the crowd. And Leland, as you mentioned, it has grown, especially since a few hours ago. But clearly over about 500 people here, maybe more than that. A few moments ago, we saw an announcement from the people speaking in the middle, telling people to come closer to the middle and protect some of the tents. They thought that the police would maybe go after the tents or their supplies. That did not happen. And really, we're continuing to see the police really just on the sides of this crowd. And it's just the university police, so only a handful of police out here that we can see. We do know that D.C. police has gathered nearby, and they are in full force. You know, we've seen dozens and dozens of cars, and they're really just sitting there from what we can tell, I guess, waiting on the university to make a decision here. But clearly they've decided not to come in, and it seems like it's because of the size of the crowd. They don't want to, it appears, deal with potentially trying to arrest that many people at once, even though they do have D.C. police just around the corner here.
Yeah, interesting. We've also heard reports from earlier in the day, I don't know if it was before you getting there, of the teachers, of the professors of GW coming out and surrounding it to try and protect the students, as it were, who are there. Evan, thank you very much. Obviously, we'll monitor your live shot throughout the evening. The University of Southern California canceled their graduation. University of Texas called them the Texas Rangers. Perhaps maybe Harvard could learn something, especially from Texas. Student at Harvard who hopes they do when we come back. As Evan Lambert just reported, protesters largely defied orders to leave their encampments across the country. At Harvard University, they did find an easy way to clear them out.
I'm going to put the tarp over it a little bit.
If you couldn't tell, those were evidently sprinklers set off at the Harvard yard. Chabos Kestenbaum is here, Harvard student who is suing the school over anti-Semitism. Chabos, what does it tell you that despite all of these lawsuits that's been brought against Harvard and other schools, threats of lawsuits, asks for refunds by parents, that nothing's changed?
Yeah, absolutely. It speaks volumes about the priorities of Harvard University, and it really underscores the fact that this university will not change, either because they are unwilling or unable to change. The only way that us Jewish students here at Harvard can receive any type of justice, of equality, and of equity is outside pressure. We need those forces on the outside to help us because we just can't do it anymore. Marla Frederick, who's the dean of the Divinity School, Alan Garber, who's the president of the university, they have been able to speak for days, and they've said nothing. And not only have they said nothing about the anti-Semitic protests that are taking over the campus, but to this day they have refused to meet with me and dozens of other Jewish students, and they've refused to enforce any of the policies or come up with a plan to combat anti-Semitism. It has been months. It is absurd. It is ridiculous that in the United States of America in 2024 that Jewish students are treated categorically different because of our religious and political identity. And it's only Jewish people, and we are sick and tired of it, and we plead for the public's support.
A lot to unpack there. I'm old enough to remember when silence was violence, so say what you want about what that means for the Harvard administration. That said, and we've talked about this throughout the show, that in a way I feel like this has gone beyond anti-Semitism, right? We got it. We got that there's a lot of what would call themselves the liberal left that are sort of neo-Marxists that hate Jews. We got it. In a larger sense, though, how did this happen that there is a large part now of these campuses, and it's not just Harvard, right? It's been all across the country. We put up live pictures of GW University. That it's different, right? It's not just we don't like Jews. It's we almost sort of don't like Western liberalism. How did that happen?
Absolutely. It's incredibly critical that people realize this is not just against the Jews, but these students, not just at Harvard, at Columbia, at Princeton, at Yale, at Stanford, at GW, they are anti-democratic, they are anti-Western, they're anti-capitalist, they're anti-American. And it's not just about anti-Semitism. This is not just a fight that is against Jews, but it is a fight against our society and our American values. I think part of the reason is look at the people who are attending these protests. So, for example, at Harvard, we have professors, we have department heads in their regalia, in their attire, coming to support and to encourage these protesters. In fact, at Harvard today, there's now on one of the tents a sign that says faculty tent. So you have students who are, and I hate to use this because it's so silly, but it's also so true, who are indoctrinated in the classrooms. Look, I've taken these classes. I know these professors. I know what they say about Jews being oppressors. I know what they say about America being the original sin. I know what they say about our, 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 I know what they say